An early autumn morning, the city felt as if it were submerged in a cold dream. A thin mist still lingered over the damp pavement after the night's rain, and the streetlights cast a dim yellow glow into the silent emptiness. Everything seemed peacefully ordinary, in a place where the unusual almost never happened. At a small police station near the central square, two veteran officers, David and Alex, were beginning what seemed to be another monotonous workday. David sat sipping hot coffee by the door, his gaze drifting idly along the street. But then, something caught his attention. A cat. Not an ordinary stray. It had a striking ash-gray coat and deep, penetrating eyes, the same cat that had been loitering around the station for months. It had no owner, but its constant presence had made many consider it a silent, familiar, regular. But today, the cat wasn't wandering as usual. It walked slowly, deliberately. David frowned, raising a hand to signal. Alex, look at the cat. Something's not right. Alex, still buried in yesterday's minor traffic incident report, glanced up and shook her head. It's just looking for food again. Same as always. David didn't reply, but his eyes never left the animal. The cat suddenly stopped in the middle of the street, faced them, and let out a long, high-pitched cry, not a normal meow. It was a call for help, urgent and unmistakable. David stepped forward, extending his hand gently. But the cat backed away, its gaze fixed intently on him. It cried out again, this time louder, more intense. Finally, Alex stood up, a trace of concern in her eyes. You see it now? It's trying to tell us something, David said, his voice turning serious. At that moment, the cat began walking again, slow and steady. It looked back, as if signaling them to follow. Alex was about to object, but the look in David's eyes made her hesitate. Part police instinct, part inexplicable feeling, something compelled her to follow. All right, but if this turns out to be a cat prank, you owe me a latte, she said, trying to lighten the tension that had begun to settle over them. And so, they began to follow the cat, in silence, accompanied only by the sound of their shoes tapping the pavement and the occasional echoed meow through the alleyways. The surrounding buildings became sparser, the streetlights dimmer, the gray sky above grew heavier, and the wind began to rise. David said nothing, he just kept his eyes on the cat, as if sensing it was about to lead them somewhere his entire career as a police officer had never prepared him for. The cat led the way in a strange manner, not hurried, not lost. Every few steps, it would turn its head to look at David and Alex, as if checking that they were still following. The two officers moved quickly through the deserted streets, leaving behind the familiar buildings of the city center. No one said a word. The deeper they went, the thicker the air became. The cold wind sliced through their skin, and the streetlights gradually faded, replaced by dark alleyways and old warehouses cloaked in decades of dust. A forgotten part of the city, a place even the police rarely ventured. I've never patrolled this area, Alex muttered, eyes scanning the abandoned neighborhood with its peeling walls and shattered windows. David didn't respond, but he, too, felt the shift in atmosphere, a silence too heavy, as if some unseen hand had smothered all sound. The cat had now stopped in front of a dilapidated warehouse, its front overgrown with vines and a rusted metal door so fragile it looked like it could crumble at the slightest touch. It turned around to face the two officers, then let out a meow, no longer urgent. It was more like a final signal. This is it. David stepped forward, reaching for the padlock, though the iron lock was thick with rust. The chain around the door was loose, recently removed. Clearly, someone had been here. The lock's been tampered with, David murmured, his hand still on the chain. Alex pulled out her flashlight and shone it through the gap in the door. Only a deep void met her eyes, thick with the stench of damp decay. What do you think's inside? She asked, voice lowered. No idea, but the cat led us all the way here, and I don't think it's playing around, David replied, with a gentle tug. The door groaned open with a shrill screech that pierced the silence. A rush of cold air surged out, carrying with it a suffocating stench. Alex instinctively covered her nose and stepped back, but David had already stepped in. The cat didn't hesitate. It slipped between them and vanished into the warehouse like a silent ghost. There was no turning back. Alex glanced at David. His nod was all she needed to follow. Inside the warehouse was a dark, Crumbling expanse. Stained walls. A decaying ceiling. Old crates scattered across the floor. And cobwebs in every corner. Every step echoed like a dry crack resounding from an unseen depth. Then, a strange sound rang out. A noise, like metal dragging across concrete. Both of them froze. David raised his flashlight and swept the beam toward the sound. The flickering light scanned each dark corner. "Something's moving," Alex whispered, gripping her flashlight like a weapon. The cat kept moving, slow and steady, heading straight for a pitch-black corner behind a collapsed stack of wooden crates. Then it stopped, staring at a small, slightly ajar metal door. David and Alex exchanged glances. "There's definitely something in there," he said, eyes locked on the door. Alex swallowed hard. "I have a feeling, someone's here." David reached out and gently pushed the door. It creaked open with a long, dragging groan, revealing a narrow room. A wave of deathly stench hit them so hard that both instinctively stepped back. The cat walked in first. David's flashlight lit up the room, and he froze. On the floor, under the dim beam, lay a body. A man, dead for days, his clothes intact, his face unmarked, and in his hand, a necklace with a golden cross pendant. Alex whispered, "No way." David knelt down, carefully lifting the pendant. It glinted in the light, like the last piece of a mystery long buried. They didn't know who the man was, but it was clear he hadn't died naturally. And he hadn't ended up here by accident. The cat, now sitting beside the corpse, didn't move. Its eyes sparkled in the dark. Not afraid, not confused, more like it was guarding. David backed away slightly, and in that very moment, another sound broke the stillness. Footsteps, fast, heavy, drawing closer to the warehouse. Someone was coming. The footsteps were getting closer by the second. David turned off his flashlight instantly and pulled Alex behind a rotting crate. Both held their breath. The space around them seemed to contract. The air grew thick, almost suffocating. "Could be a homeless person?" Alex whispered. David shook his head. "No one wanders this area. And no one comes here, armed." Because the next sound wasn't just footsteps. It was the click of metal. Someone was chambering around. A man appeared at the warehouse door. Tall build, dressed in dark clothing, holding a gun. He scanned the darkness like someone who was used to it, who didn't need a flashlight. The dim light from outside briefly lit up his face, but it was enough for David to recognize him. He was the one who'd been tailing them before. Alex whispered, "It's him." They stayed silent, completely still. From their hiding spot, they could see the man staring intently at the cat. The cat was still beside the body, unmoving, not meowing, but its eyes, cold, deep, met the man's gaze like a silent challenge. The stranger hesitated. His expression changed, not fear, confusion, then anger. He pulled something from his coat pocket, something metallic glinting in the faint light, and started moving deeper inside. David looked at Alex. No words were needed. Their eyes said it all. "He cannot see the body. He cannot see us." Then, the cat meowed. A long, high-pitched cry, like a blade cutting through the silence. The man flinched, his eyes locked on the cat. But in that moment, David and Alex made their move. They burst from cover, heading for a side exit. But their footsteps alerted the intruder. He spun around, gun raised. A gunshot shattered the silence. Bang! The bullet grazed David's shoulder. Tearing through his jacket, he winced, grabbing Alex and dragging her out of the warehouse. Another round of gunfire exploded behind them. Bullets slamming into rusted walls and splintering rotted crates with terrifying force. In the chaos, no one noticed the cat didn't run. It stayed, as if holding the stranger back. David and Alex escaped into the shadow of a nearby alley. Behind them, the footsteps of the pursuer followed relentlessly. "Left turn," David shouted. They veered into a side passage of the warehouse district, weaving through dark corridors reeking of mildew and rotting garbage. "We need backup," Alex said, holding the scrape on David's arm. David nodded. "Not yet. We need to go back, get evidence. If we leave empty-handed, everything vanishes." They ducked behind an old shipping container. Panting, David pulled out his phone and called HQ. Speaking fast. "This is Lieutenant David. We need immediate response team to Warehouse 14. Eastern outskirts. Possible suspect linked to missing children case. Requesting armed support." The dispatcher confirmed, but David knew, It would take at least 10 minutes. 10 minutes in which the man could erase every trace. As David hung up, they turned back toward the warehouse door. But something strange was waiting for them. Another meow. This time, from behind. The cat. It had come back. Blood stained its front paw. But its eyes, unwavering. It looked at David, then turned around, as if to lead the way once more. "You see that?" Alex whispered, her voice barely audible. "It came back. It's not afraid." David didn't answer. He stood, his eyes fixed on the slender figure walking quietly ahead. "We follow it, this time, all the way." In the dim light of dawn, the small cat led the way like a ghost. No words were needed, no gestures. David and Alex followed it, silent as if slipping into the darkest part of a world they had never been trained to face. They crossed an open lot behind the warehouse, overgrown with wild grass and strewn with rubble from crumbling buildings. Cold wind slid through cracks in broken walls, carrying a whispering moan, like someone murmuring from the deepest parts of the night. "Where are we going?" Alex asked quietly, though he didn't expect an answer. David tightened his grip on the gun. "I don't know, but this cat, it does." The cat stopped before a concrete wall, now covered in moss and decay over time. There was nothing remarkable about it, except for one small detail no one would notice without looking closely. A faint smear of recently dried cement around a rectangular outline, matching the shape of a hidden door. "Here," David whispered. Alex knelt down, scanning with her flashlight. Sure enough, there was a narrow edge, a nearly invisible seam in the crumbling wall. David pressed both hands to it and shoved hard. The door groaned, dry, slow, but eventually creaked open, revealing a narrow, pitch-black passage leading underground. A stench of mold and damp hit them like a slap. "We're going down?" Alex swallowed. David nodded. "This isn't on any building plan. Definitely off the books." The cat didn't wait. It slipped into the darkness first. Without hesitation, David flicked on his flashlight, illuminating the stairwell, an old metal staircase, rusted, descending into nothingness. If there's anywhere someone wants to hide something, this is it. They descended. Each step echoed on the iron stairs, mingling with the faint drip of water deep below. With every step, the air grew colder, thicker, harder to breathe. At the bottom, the flashlight revealed a cramped underground chamber. Concrete walls, low ceiling, a manually operated air vent, and at the center of the room, a wooden table. On it, folders, technical schematics, and photographs. David approached, cautiously flipping through the images. "This is the city map?" Alex took a step back. "Not just that," David said slowly. "Look closely, the red marks indicate missing persons. Each dot, a child. And this." He lifted a stack of papers. Personal records, descriptions, even medical files. Alex snatched one. "Isabella, the girl who disappeared recently." David nodded. "These aren't just disappearances. This is an organized abduction network. Systematic, meticulous. They've been studying each child like their assets, to be preserved." The flashlight swept to the left. A large industrial refrigerator was placed against the wall. David opened it. Inside, tranquilizers, syringes, and blood storage units. Alex clenched her fists. "They're harvesting biologics? Why?" David didn't answer. He unfolded a document marked Top Secret, Special Initiative. The title read, Project Horizon, Research on Genetic Potential in High Cognitive Index Infants. "God," David muttered. "They're not abducting at random. They're hunting a gene. They're selecting." They both stood in silence. Another meow echoed, soft, steady, from the corner of the room. The cat sat there, beside a small, locked metal compartment. David moved closer, pried it open with a metal bar. The lock snapped free. Inside was an old tape recorder, with a worn cassette already inserted. David placed it on the table and pressed play. A voice spoke, low and fragmented. "If you're hearing this, I'm already dead. They found me. They're expanding, and the next one could be anyone. I tried to leave enough evidence." The voice paused, followed by heavy breathing. "The cat is the key. It remembers faces, places they passed through. I trained it. If it's found you, you've been chosen to end this." Alex froze. "Where the hell are we, David?" David looked at the cat. Its eyes didn't blink, as if confirming everything they just heard. Then, the sound of police sirens echoed in the distance. "Backup's here." David whispered. But this is only the beginning. The wailing of police sirens tore through the dense night air. But to David, that sound carried no reassurance. It was a signal. They had been exposed. We had to get out of here, Alex said urgently, eyes flicking toward the entrance. David grabbed the old tape recorder, stuffing it into his coat pocket. He scanned the room quickly, then collected a few folders and the map marked with deep red dots. They couldn't risk leaving them behind. The cat leapt softly onto the table, its eyes not on them, but fixed on the staircase they had descended earlier. They're here, David whispered. In the distance, footsteps echoed, more than one pair. Coordinated, with orders, not a standard patrol unit. There was no time. David and Alex followed a narrow corridor leading to an abandoned control room. They locked the door behind them with a rusted iron bar and searched for another way out. Any cameras? Alex asked in a low voice. No, they hid this place so well they didn't even bother with surveillance. They never thought anyone would find it. David replied, stopping in front of a yellowing wall covered with fake inspection seals. A small opening in the ceiling led to an old attic crawlspace. The cat had already leapt up, clinging to a steam pipe, vanishing like it had always known the way. Alex climbed up after it. David followed. As they reached the dusty rooftop, David heard a voice echoing below. Someone's definitely been in here. Find them, and if you see that cat, shoot it. That last line sent a chill down his spine. Wind whipped across the roof. The night was shifting toward storm. Misty rain began to fall. From this height, the entire abandoned warehouse district stretched below them like an industrial graveyard, rusted tin roofs, broken chimneys, and beyond the perimeter, the glowing city slept, unaware of the darkness eating at its edges. There, Alex pointed. A large drainage pipe led straight out to the rear of the warehouse. Near the tree line, they climbed in and slid down in silence. When they landed on the damp ground, David looked back at the rooftop, where the cat still stood, silent as a shadow, gazing down at them with eyes that seemed to say goodbye. You think it won't follow us? Alex asked. David nodded. It's staying behind, to distract them. And then, gunfire rang out. Screams. Chaos. David didn't look back. He turned away. They returned to the precinct just before 4 a.m., covered in mud and metal dust. In the break room at the back, harsh fluorescent light illuminated the stolen files. Blood still oozed from David's hand where he'd torn it, freeing the iron bar. Alex opened a folder labeled, Classified Files, Unofficial Storage. Inside were biological analyses, lists of children marked suitable, non-responsive, monitor closely, along with infrared camera images. This isn't just abduction, Alex said, her voice tight. This is selection, breeding, like they're trying to create something. David nodded. They're not just taking children. They're cataloging, classifying, implanting something. He unrolled a larger map. On it, a network of locations, small clinics, charity centers, households that had reported missing children but never received proper follow-up, all connected by red lines. There's someone in the system, David said quietly. In the department, in the government, someone's protecting this. Alex looked at him. So what do we do? David checked the time. We can't go through official channels. If we file a report, they'll erase everything before anyone can act. He picked up the cassette tape from the old recorder. But this is living proof. David stood, his eyes sharp. We go public, media, community, direct. We wake the whole damn town. Alex looked at him, then nodded. We might die for this. David replied without blinking. But if we stay silent, how many more children will vanish? The back door creaked open. A young officer peeked inside. You called for me? David motioned. We need a car. No questions. No logs. Now. The officer hesitated, then nodded. As they stepped into the lot, Alex glanced down the dark street where the warehouse lay buried in night. You think that cat really understood what it was doing? He asked. David didn't look back. He only said softly, it didn't need to understand. It just knew. Where there's evil, it would lead someone to it. Alex said nothing, then opened the car door. The vehicle pulled away, disappearing into the shadows, carrying two people, and a truth no one wanted to touch. The sky had yet to brighten. The city remained in slumber, wrapped in fog and windless silence, but the hearts of David and Alex beat like war drums. The silver car, discreetly loaned by the young officer, sped through the deserted streets like a ghost. Alex gripped the steering wheel, her face taut as a tightened string. David, in the passenger seat, flipped through the police radio channels, an earpiece buried deep, eyes scanning frequency numbers. No trace signals. At least they don't know where we're headed, yet. David said quietly. But it won't be long. Alex replied. We're sitting on a bomb. And everyone involved has already been cleaned up. We might be the last ones. David opened the document case. The papers inside were yellowed, marked with outdated military codes. Nearly impossible to reference. But one thing was consistent. The victims' names weren't found in any official civilian database. No one remembers these children, David muttered, staring at a page bearing a child's hand-drawn picture, a little girl, beneath which was written, "High potential, biosensory response exceeds threshold." We'll start with the press, Alex said, turning onto the Northern Boulevard. The local radio station, they've got their own signal. If we air the evidence, the whole town will hear it. David nodded, but inside, unease churned. A chill crept down his spine, not from technology tracking them, but from something older, more primal. As they approached the old radio station on the city's edge, once a wartime transmission hub, David suddenly motioned to stop the car. He was staring into the shadows between two abandoned buildings. A cat, he whispered. The gray cat, still the same one. It stood at the alley's edge, unmoved by the cold night mist, its eyes glowing with something not of this world. We left that warehouse hours ago, Alex said softly. How could it? David didn't answer. He stepped out of the car, approaching the cat. It didn't move, only stared, not like an animal, but like a gatekeeper, a guardian of truth. It turned and entered the alley. Wait, don't tell me you're actually, Alex began. But David was already following. The alley led to a crumbling building, marked with signs that had once housed a medical research facility. Now long decommissioned. Faint lettering still read, Ministry of Health, Genetic Physiology Testing Zone 2. Though scratched beyond legibility. Alex caught up. What is this? We don't have time to play detective. But then he froze. The door was open. No force had been applied. It simply opened. The cat entered first, unafraid, as if it had once lived there. Or perhaps, had been created there. Inside, dust and time blanketed everything. But it wasn't abandoned. Signs of recent activity were unmistakable. Long drag marks on the floor. Half-removed fluorescent lights. And on the central table, a recording device still running. A red light blinked steadily. David pressed play. February 17th. Sensory response test on subject M001 unsuccessful. However, subject M019, codename Felix, displayed spatial recognition across nonlinear environments and could navigate tactical paths without cognitive prompting. Conclusion. Subject M019 should be released into open environments. Domestic cats possess higher than average densities of bioelectrical sensory cells, capable of guiding forces to response zones, without exposing data structures. Alex froze. M019, he looked at the cat. It's him. The cat sat on the table, directly beside the audio device, as if confirming it all. David turned to the filing cabinet. A red-bound dossier read, Project Spectre, location and white lenses. He opened it. Inside was a detailed list of missing children, maps, distribution charts, and annotations on special genetic markers, and most importantly, a list of those concealing the truth. Their names. Names of superiors. Names of people David once called colleagues. We can't take this to the press, David said softly. Alex looked at him. Why not? David flipped to the last page. All media outlets in this city were integrated into the information sanitization system as of last November. Any data transmitted over the airwaves is filtered through intermediary servers controlled by Project Spectre. Meaning, anyone could be silenced. Without law, without press. There was only one path left. We bring it to the light ourselves, David said. He turned to the cat. It remained where it sat, unmoving. Its eyes now reflected more than light. They reflected truth. No one spoke on the way back to the car. David clutched the Spectre dossier like he was holding a ticking bomb, while Alex kept glancing at the cat sitting quietly on the back seat. tail curled neatly, eyes fixed on the window, as if calculating an escape route. "We can't use the press. Can't call for backup," David said quietly. "So what's the plan? Post it on social media and wait for them to crash the signal?" Alex snapped. "This whole city is a cage. Every node, every antenna belongs to Spectre." David was silent. Then, suddenly, as if something clicked, he turned back. The old Radio Shack on the western outskirts. Analog frequency. No one uses it anymore, but the equipment still works. Alex's eyes widened. "You mean that abandoned place kids used to hijack to broadcast pranks?" David nodded. "Exactly. AM band. Frequency 950. It's unencrypted. No digital intermediaries. As long as we broadcast strong enough, the whole area will hear it." Alex floored the gas. Dawn neared. Heavy clouds drifted low over the horizon like a silent warning. The shack sat alone atop a craggy hill, surrounded by wild grass and rusted telecom towers. The wooden door hung ajar, half the sign missing. No one had set foot there in over a decade. David flipped the switch. The power system sputtered to life with the groans of age, a low hum from the power box, the hiss of the cassette deck, and finally, the sound of wind through the studio microphone. "Mic's alive," Alex confirmed. "Weak signal, but it'll reach a 15-kilometer radius." David took a deep breath. He opened the file, his face more serious than ever. "You going to read it all?" Alex asked. "No." David shook his head. "Just the parts they can't ignore. Victim names, locations, and the name behind it all." He brought the microphone close. "Prepare to record and broadcast." A second later, his voice rang out, not loud, not theatrical, just calm and honest. From someone with nothing left to lose. "If you're hearing this, I want you to know, everything you think is real might just be the shadow of a buried truth. My name is David. I'm a police officer. And along with my partner, Alex, we found a place no one was ever supposed to discover. An abandoned warehouse. Files on missing children. A secret facility once operated under Project Spectre." He paused. Alex adjusted the antenna. "We have images, names, dates, and maps. These children didn't disappear by accident. They were taken for experiments. We're being hunted, and if we don't survive the day, I beg you, don't let this voice be forgotten." The broadcast light turned red. Signal peaked. Alex pressed send. In that brief moment, the city listened. Old radios, kitchen radios, truck speakers, even random AM listeners, all simultaneously heard David's voice echo through the airwaves, unedited, unfiltered. But then, the sound of engines in the distance. 2 black SUVs surged up the hill. "They know," Alex said. "They've located the signal. They're blocking the transmission from going any farther." David grabbed the files, yanked the drive from the transmitter. "Back door," Alex yelled. They burst through the rear emergency exit. The cat was still there. It stood on the rocky ledge, staring directly at the dark forest behind the hill. "Not a sound. Follow it," David said without hesitation. They sprinted into the forest. Beneath the thick canopy and freezing morning mist, the light fractured and all sound grew strange, even the footsteps behind them. 3 chased, 2 fled, 1 cat led. The cat stopped at the base of a hollow tree. Inside was a path downward, an old Cold War-era bomb shelter tunnel system. Alex panted. "What the hell?" David didn't answer. He just looked at the cat. It didn't follow them in. It stood there, turned away, then disappeared down another path, as if its mission was done. "Thank you," David whispered. The shelter door closed behind them. In the frigid darkness of the underground tunnel, there was no cat, no sound of engines, only one truth growing louder in their hearts. The truth had been sown. But would that seed have time to grow, before everything was erased? The bunker was dark. No electricity. No signal. David switched on his flashlight. The narrow beam swept across damp, green-gray stone walls, soaked with moisture and time. Above them, decaying electrical wires dangled like dead snakes, and droplets of water dripped steadily, tick, tick, like the heartbeat of a place barely clinging to life. "This system is so old I'd say it dates back to the Cold War," Alex whispered. "Maybe it used to be a nuclear command post." David nodded. "But now it's where Spectre erases their tracks." The tunnel split into 2 paths. No map, no signal, No GPS. David crouched down, examining faint dirt smudges on the concrete floor. A worn-out boot print. And next to it, a cat paw print. Still fresh. He's still guiding us, David said softly. Alex exhaled, shivering slightly from the cold and the anxiety. A cat, leading 2 cops underground, to expose a human erasing organization. That's no ordinary cat, David replied. I'm starting to believe it was made for this. They followed the tracks. 20 minutes later, the corridor opened into a large chamber with a high ceiling and soundproofed walls. Industrial-grade air conditioning still humming faintly. The dim light from their flashlights revealed a wall covered in photos. Children's photos, each one a real face. Underneath each, a code number. A name, a date of birth, a date of disappearance. They stood in silence. Alex's hands trembled. This is a living archive. David removed one photo. A 7-year-old girl. Big eyes, black hair, a candid smile. Name, Isabella J. Mendez. Note on the back. Negative reaction to gamma-4 test. Discarded. David felt his throat go dry. They classify kids like lab specimens. And what is Spectre? Alex muttered. If not an incubator for monsters? A small clunk echoed. The steel door behind them slammed shut. Not wind. Not automatic systems. Someone had closed it. They know we're here. David drew his gun. Alex spun around, sweeping the light behind them, and for the first time, he saw a figure moving silently behind a one-way mirror on the other side of the room. The face was obscured, but someone was watching them. David stepped forward slowly. At his feet was a round floor panel, metallic. 4 locking points, with a small input port. He pulled the drive from his coat, the one they took from the radio station, and tried inserting it into the old data port. A green light blinked on. The hatch opened. A small elevator emerged. No buttons, no door, just one direction, down. Alex hesitated. I can't believe we're about to step into this. David whispered, but if what we're looking for is down there, I'm not stopping. They entered the elevator. It closed automatically behind them. When it hit the bottom, the first thing they heard was music. A lullaby, playing from overhead speakers. Gentle, steady, but in this setting, it sounded like the soundtrack to hell. The door opened. A brightly lit observation room. Fluorescent lights above. Reinforced glass enclosing individual holding cells. David approached one window. Inside, a 10-year-old boy. Eyes closed. Vitals hooked to monitors. Alex read the data screen. Subject 23 General Falcon. Beta activation incomplete. David froze. They weren't just abducting children. They were rewiring their brains. At the end of the corridor, a sealed door bore the label, Spectre 0. David was about to force it open when a voice crackled through the intercom. Welcome, David. Alex. A woman's voice. Calm, low, emotionless. We knew you'd come. Because that cat, we left it for you. David clenched his fists. Alex raised his weapon. You think you found the truth. But in fact, we've been activating it. Every step you've taken was part of the Spectre program. No response. Then, the door opened. Inside was a massive ring-shaped device. Looked like a teleportation gate, and in the center of the room, a framed photograph. David stepped closer. The photo was himself. In military uniform, inside a lab, standing next to a boy, the same boy from the cell. And in the corner of the picture, the cat. Alex whispered, God, you were part of Spectre? David stumbled back, gasping. No, that's not possible. But memories, blurry, fragmented, started rushing back. Screams, orders, surveillance footage he thought he'd destroyed, but it had survived. Alex placed a hand on his shoulder. It's okay. Whatever you were. You're on the right side now. David nodded, then looked toward the central server. We don't just run. We erase Spectre. Alex smiled. And you know I'm coming with you. Right? Behind them, the cat had returned, standing quietly in the corridor. Watching. It didn't need to lead anymore. Now, it only needed to witness. Witness Spectre fall. The room was blindingly white. The air was thick with the smell of electronics and ozone. David stood frozen before the old photograph, where he saw himself. In military uniform, standing beside a child and a strange symbol in the corner of the image. 3 interlocking circles, the emblem of Spectre 0. Behind him, Alex still held his gun tightly, eyes scanning the room. You okay? Alex's voice came softly. David clenched the photo in his hand. I used to work here, he whispered, not as a cop, as a technician in the first program. A heavy silence settled between them. And that child was me. David whispered. Spectre erased my memories. Alex froze. You mean? Spectre didn't just abduct children, they trained them, programmed them, and reset their memories like installing software. I was one of the first, then reinserted into society as a normal adult. But the real memories never truly disappeared. A door inside the room creaked open. The intercom spoke again, the same woman's voice, cold and sharp like molten steel. David, it's time for you to remember everything. Not to betray us, but to take over. You're the only surviving product of Generation Zero. You belong to Spectre. Alex stepped back, eyeing David warily, but didn't raise his weapon. David shook his head, walked up to the control panel. No, I'm no longer your software. He placed his hand on the old fingerprint scanner, but it recognized him instantly. A screen lit up. Rows of video files, experiment logs, and journals appeared. Alex stepped forward. What are we looking at? David pointed to a file. Project Mirror. Objective: implant false memories into subjects during neural developmental stages. A video played. They saw a room identical to the one they stood in. A child strapped to a chair, eyes wide, staring into a screen projecting artificial scenes, a fake life, fake parents, fake memories, fake school. Those memories were injected into the brain like a syringe. Alex whispered. They created people who don't even know who they are. People carrying memories that don't belong to them. David nodded. And if Spectre survives, hundreds more will become me. Another steel door unlocked. The final door, leading to the Spectre Zero core data chamber. At its center was a massive central server, with a touchscreen control panel and biometric lock. A red light blinked, awaiting verification. The woman's voice echoed for the last time. David, you are the final key. You can erase Spectre, or activate Phase 2. The propagation phase. Choose. Alex looked at David, saying nothing. But his eyes were filled with trust, and a hint of uncertainty. David looked down at his hands. Then looked at the cat, sitting silently in the corner of the room. Its eyes gleaming, unblinking, as if waiting for the answer. He placed his hand on the scanner. The screen lit up. A line of code appeared. Privilege confirmed. Generation Zero David. Erase system or activate propagation? Beside it were two buttons. Erase and upload. The air froze. David raised his hand, but instead of pressing immediately, he turned to Alex. If I was once a part of Spectre, then now, I'll be the one to end it. He pressed erase. The light turned off. The entire system trembled slightly, then fell silent. All of Spectre Zero's data, records, programming codes, surveillance networks, vanished forever. And at that moment, the entire room issued one final warning. Self-destruct in 60 seconds. Alex cursed. They won't leave behind anything but ashes. David chuckled. Even under pressure. Good. No one should ever repeat this. They sprinted out of the room. The cat leading the way, weaving through narrow corridors. Retracing their steps. 30 seconds. They reached the elevator shaft, but the power was cut. Alex kicked open a maintenance hatch, revealing an emergency escape tunnel, the one the cat had already discovered. The three bolted through the narrow passage, alarms howling behind them. Explosions echoed from below. The first blast had begun. 10 seconds. Jump, Alex shouted. They hurled themselves through the final hatch, just as a wave of hot air and blinding light surged up from below. Spectre Zero was annihilated. They lay panting on the cold ground, dust and debris clinging to their skin. The cat approached, climbed onto David's chest, and lay still. No more meowing, no more guidance. Its mission was complete. Alex sat in stunned silence. He always knew where to go. David gently stroked its back and whispered, "And now no one else will ever be programmed like me again." The distant sound of helicopter blades approached. The response team had arrived. Alex turned to David. So now what? David looked up at the sky, slowly turning gold with dawn. Now, we find the other children. The ones who survived Spectre. And we protect them, just like this cat protected us. Alex nodded. The sun rose, and the cat, saying nothing, walked silently toward the light. 3 weeks after the destruction of Spectre Zero, the city remained peaceful, as if nothing had happened. No news coverage, no rumors, because Spectre had never officially existed in any record. Only a few people knew, and they had decided not to let the silence continue. In a small room belonging to the Special Investigation Unit, Alex spread out the files on the table. ID codes of children missing over the past 10 years. Signs of mysterious disappearances. Altered medical records. Erased identities. Everything was starting to form a complete system. David quietly stepped in, holding a printout from the data room. He placed the paper down. On it was a list of 7 names. Second-generation list. Each name was tagged with a code. Subject S2S7. Children. Those meant to succeed him. They're still alive, David whispered. Inspector had planned to put them into training before it was shut down. Alex frowned. How many people are still in the network? David shook his head. Unclear, but I know they're still hiding. Just then, the doorbell rang. David turned on the security monitor. An elderly woman, bundled in a thick coat, with snow-white hair, stood at the door. David narrowed his eyes. Who are you? She pointed to the cat lying next to David. I used to care for it. A long time ago. They sat around the table. Steam rising from teacups. The woman's eyes weary. I was a nurse inspector. She began, her voice deep and slow. But I disagreed with their neural programming. I fled, and took one thing with me. She reached down and gently stroked the cat. It's not just an animal. It was chosen, trained to detect abnormal neural signals. To lead the way, but when Spectre strayed too far from humanity. I severed its link, released it, hoping it would find someone worthy. She looked directly at David. And it found you. David remained silent for a long time. Alex blurted out, do you know the identities of the next generation children? The woman nodded. I don't know their locations. But I know each one carries something biologically tagged, a bracelet, a keychain, a small notebook. They're activation signals. You shut down Spectre. But if someone else figures out how to use those signals, everything will repeat. David clenched his fists. Then we had to get to them first. The following week, their journey began. David and Alex followed the traces, from an orphanage in Denver, to a neurological clinic in Maine, to an abandoned medical station on the Canadian border. Each place revealed a faint clue, just enough to find a child. A boy named Liam. He didn't remember who he was. But he dreamed of a white room filled with high-frequency sound. A girl named Ivy, hiding in a deserted nursing home, clutching a necklace etched with 3 interlocking circles. Both reacted strongly upon seeing David. As if they had known him for a long time. David didn't explain. He only said one thing. From today on, you are free. On the final day of their journey, they stopped in the northern woods. The elderly woman had passed away, peacefully in her sleep. But before she died, she left a letter. If Spectre taught you how to erase memory, then compassion will help you restore it. These children need someone not to program them, but to listen. David read the letter in silence. He placed it in the hands of the last child they found, a girl who never spoke, but whose eyes, sharp as glass, followed his every move. 1 year later, a small house nestled in the forest, walls covered in ivy, with a wooden sign carved with the words, "The Echo Project, where memory is returned." David and Alex ran the center. The children rescued from Spectre, they weren't victims. They were survivors. And here, they were taught to define themselves. No more programming, no more conditioning, only choice. And an old cat, lying on the windowsill, eyes half closed, watching the children laugh and play under the sunlight. It no longer needed to lead the way, because the path had already been found. David and Alex crept through the dense shadows of the warehouse, each step deliberate, as if even the slightest sound could alert an entire underground network. They silently followed the cat, their quiet but mysterious guide, now moving toward a small side door of the warehouse. David motioned for Alex to stop and pressed his ear against the door. Straining to listen, from inside, muffled, broken voices drifted through. Someone was speaking. And it was no coincidence. Alex nodded as David gently pushed the door open. A small room, dimly lit, appeared before them. In the faint glow, Three men stood around a large wooden table. Scattered across it were documents, maps, photographs, and files of the missing children they had just uncovered. Alex's eyes immediately fixed on a photo placed at the center of the table, the face of the girl named Isabella. She had gone missing 3 months ago. "Oh God," Alex whispered, eyes brimming with tears. The men hadn't noticed them yet, too absorbed in a tense argument. One of them, the same man who had chased them that night, looked agitated, repeatedly barking at the other two. "Someone stole the documents. We need to find them before this whole thing blows up." David and Alex realized they were standing inside the operations center of a true criminal network. This wasn't just about kidnapping children, it was a system. Organized, methodical, and backed by powerful protectors. David shot Alex a grave look. "We have to go. If we don't, there won't be anyone left to tell the truth." But before they could act, the cat, their strange companion, suddenly leapt onto the table, landing directly on the scattered papers. All three men recoiled, startled, their eyes locking on the dark corner where the two officers stood. One of them squinted, whispering, "That cat, it's back again." David didn't waste another second. He grabbed Alex's arm, and the two of them immediately retreated from the room, hearts pounding as angry shouts erupted behind them. "Find them, now!" Footsteps thundered across stairwells and creaky wooden floors. David and Alex fled the warehouse like shadows in the night. They dashed through dark corridors, ducking behind cracked concrete columns, trying to stay silent. They had slipped from their pursuer's sight, but not their hunt. Gunshots rang out behind them, a bullet skimming the wall just inches from Alex's head. "Move," David yelled. By the time they escaped the warehouse, their chests were about to burst from exertion, their legs barely holding them up. Behind them, a small shape moved with silent grace, the cat. It remained calm, its eyes gleaming like twin gems, watching every move they made. Alex bent down, whispering softly, "Thank you. You knew what we needed, didn't you?" David didn't reply. He was clutching one of the files, undeniable proof, alive in his hands, but he knew the road ahead was still long. They had just opened the door to a dark world that no one had dared look into before. It was late at night. The city seemed to still be asleep, unaware that on the outskirts of an old warehouse, two police officers, David and Alex, had just escaped the grip of a trembling underground criminal network. Both were still gasping for breath, clutching the folders they had risked their lives to obtain. Under the faint glow of a cracked street lamp, the cat sat quietly, its eyes fixed on the warehouse, as if guarding a memory that only it could truly understand. David wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. He looked at Alex, and without exchanging a word, they nodded in silent agreement. They immediately made contact with their station, but not through official channels. They knew they had touched something deep, a network that may have already infiltrated the police force itself. Instead, David used his personal phone to call an old friend, a journalist who had once exposed major corruption cases. "Meet me at the newsroom in 30 minutes. I've got something that could change everything." When they arrived, the grizzled, silver-haired reporter was already waiting. The look in his eyes told David and Alex he knew something big was coming. They sat at a table and laid out the files. Inside were lists of dozens of missing children, photographs, detailed case notes, and even evidence linking suspects, bank accounts, and encrypted internal communications. The reporter sat silently for a long while. Then, he spoke quietly. "If I publish this, we might change this city forever. But there will be many who want to silence everyone involved." Alex replied with a firm voice, "We've already made our choice. And there's no turning back." The article was published the next morning, titled, "Warehouse Secrets: A Child Abduction Network and the Figures Behind the Badge of Justice." The entire city was shaken. Internal investigations were launched within the police force. Several high-ranking officials were suspended. Parents who had once fallen into despair began to find hope again. Human rights organizations stepped in, and public outcry, like a rising wave, could no longer be stopped. While others celebrated the first victory of truth, David and Alex chose to quietly step out of the spotlight. They knew the battle was far from over. But first, they needed to return to the warehouse one last time, to close the journey that had begun with the solitary cry of a cat. When the two returned to the starting point, the warehouse had already been sealed off. but right at the entrance. As if by fate, the same cat was still there. It sat on the steps, its golden eyes shimmering in the morning sun. David approached, gently stroking its back, and softly said, "Thank you, without you, no one would have ever found those children." The cat didn't meow, didn't turn its head, it simply looked out toward the horizon, like an ancient soul guarding justice in a world that had once been dark. A few weeks later, David and Alex visited an animal rescue shelter. Among the kittens being cared for was a small gray cat, with bright eyes and a posture that felt all too familiar. Alex laughed as he saw David kneel down and reach out toward the little kitten. "You think we've been given another chance?" The kitten, unafraid, came closer and rubbed its head against his hand. David smiled. "Welcome home, little one." The story came to a close, not with gunfire, not with applause, but with a gentle gaze between a man and a silent guardian spirit that had led them into darkness, then brought them back to the light. Because sometimes, a guide doesn't need to speak. They only need to look at us and believe.